She accidentally married a billionaire husband, and he refused to let her go. Hi, my very, very beautiful family. Welcome back to Mr. Peter's Stories. How are you, my beautiful family? I'm sorry I haven't been able to reply on time. I'm busy with Binta as we are on our honeymoon, so please don't mind. Here's a short, loving prayer for my beautiful family. Dear Lord, bless my beautiful family with peace, joy, and love. Protect them, provide for them, and answer their heart's desires. Keep us united, strong, and always surrounded by your grace. Amen. Also, my beautiful family, the response on my videos is getting lower day by day. I kindly request everyone to like and comment on this video. How many times have I told you, this channel is not only mine, it belongs to all of us. Don't forget, we are one family. Let's start with love. The chandeliers of the Grand Plaza Hotel ballroom cast a golden glow over the charity gala. Sabine Cove moved along the periphery, a shadow among shadows, her slim fingers balancing a tray of champagne flutes that caught and fractured the light. Her feet, accustomed to the demanding precision of dance, ached in the sensible black heels mandated by the catering company. 6 hours of this, and she'd have enough to cover next month's dance studio rental fees. The thought sustained her as another socialite plucked a glass from her tray without acknowledging her existence. "You're wasting your time with that one," murmured Julian, another server, as he passed. "Mrs. Harrington never tips. She thinks a smile from her is payment enough." Sabine allowed herself a small laugh, and here I was, planning to pay my rent. With smiles. Speaking of which, Julian nodded toward the entrance. The man of the hour has arrived, Rhys Thor himself. Worth watching. He's known to slip $100 bills to the staff he likes. Sabine followed Julian's gaze and felt her breath catch. Even from across the room, Rhys Thor commanded attention. Tall and broad-shouldered, he moved with the easy confidence of a man who had never known what it meant to be invisible. For the next hour, she navigated the crowd with practiced grace, her dancer's poise allowing her to weave between clusters of New York's elite without drawing attention. She'd perfected the art of being seen only when needed, a skill as valuable in service as it was on stage. "Champagne?" The deep voice caught her by surprise. She turned to find herself face to face with Rhys Thor. Up close, he was even more striking. Sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw, and eyes so intensely blue they seemed almost unnatural against his tanned skin. "Mr. Thor," she managed, extending her tray. "Of course." He studied her, his gaze lingering on her face. "You're not the usual staff they have at these functions." "No," she agreed, holding his gaze with more boldness than was strictly professional. "I'm not." Something flickered in his eyes, surprise perhaps at being addressed so directly. Most people, she imagined, approached him with careful deference. She was making her way back to the kitchen when disaster struck. A drunken guest stumbled into her path, colliding with her tray and sending champagne cascading down the front of her white shirt and black skirt. "Oh, God!" she gasped, the cold liquid seeping through the fabric. Humiliation burned hotter than anger as Sabine felt eyes turning her way. The catering manager appeared at her side, expression pinched with displeasure. "Go clean yourself up," she said tersely. "Use the staff restroom downstairs." "The nearest one is the guest powder room," Sabine pointed out, desperate to escape the stairs. "Fine, but be quick about it." The plush interior of the powder room was blessedly empty. She grabbed paper towels and began dabbing at the stains, fighting back tears of frustration. The door opened behind her, and she quickly straightened, forcing a neutral expression. But it wasn't another guest, it was Rhys Thor. "I'm sorry," he said, immediately stepping back. "I was looking for somewhere quiet to take a call. I must have taken a wrong turn." "It's fine," Sabine replied, acutely conscious of her bedraggled appearance. "I'm just dealing with a champagne casualty." Instead of leaving, he stepped fully into the powder room, letting the door swing shut behind him. From his pocket, he produced a crisp handkerchief. "Here," he offered. "Silk works better than paper for champagne." Sabine hesitated before accepting it. "You do this often? Rescue champagne-soaked servers in ladies' restrooms?" A smile broke across his face, transforming his features from merely handsome to devastating. "First time, actually. But I've had my share of wine spilled on me at charity functions." "I find that hard to believe," she said, dabbing at her skirt with his handkerchief. "You don't seem like the type people would dare to spill drinks on. When people are intimidated, they get clumsy." Sabine glanced up at him. "Is that your strategy? Intimidating people?" His eyebrows rose slightly. "Most people don't ask me such direct questions. Most people probably want something from you. And you don't?" She handed back his handkerchief, now stained with champagne. "Just directions to the nearest exit so I can continue my job without smelling like a winery." He laughed then, a rich sound that seemed to fill the small space. Through the service door, left down the corridor, then right past the coat check. "Thank you, Mr. Thor." "Reese," he corrected. "And you are?" "Sabine. Sabine Cove. Would you like to get some fresh air before returning to the winery? There's a private balcony just past the coat check. The view of the city is..." Clarifying. Every instinct told her to decline. Yet something in his expression, a vulnerability behind the confidence, made her pause. 5 minutes, she conceded. "Then I need to get back before I'm fired." The balcony was exactly where he'd said, tucked away from the main event. The night air was cool against her damp clothes. The city spread below them like a carpet of stars. "Better?" Reese asked, coming to stand beside her at the railing. "Much," she admitted. "Thank you for the rescue." "It was entirely selfish," he replied. "I've been looking for an excuse to escape that room all evening." "The man whose name is on the invitation wants to escape his own charity gala?" He turned to face her, his expression suddenly serious. "Do you know what the hardest part of having money is, Sabine?" "I can't say that I do. Never knowing if people see you or just your bank account." The raw honesty in his voice struck her. Before she could respond, voices approached from inside. Without thinking, Reese pulled her into the shadows of the balcony, their bodies suddenly close in the darkness. "Is that why you're hiding on a balcony? With a champagne-soaked server, instead of mingling with your guests?" she asked, heart racing at his proximity. "Perhaps I prefer genuine conversation to rehearsed flattery. And perhaps," she countered, "you simply enjoy the novelty of someone who doesn't know the right fork to use at dinner." "The right fork," he said softly, his gaze dropping to her lips, "is always the one that gets the food to your mouth." Later, Sabine would never be sure who moved first. All she knew was that one moment they were talking and the next, his lips were on hers, warm, insistent, and unfathomably gentle. The kiss deepened, his hands coming up to cradle her face as if she were something infinitely precious. When they broke apart, breathless and stunned, reality came rushing back. "I should go," she whispered. "They'll be looking for me." "Stay," he said, his voice husky. "Come with me, anywhere, tonight." It was madness. She barely knew him. He was Reese Thor, and she was a dancer moonlighting as a server to make rent. But as she looked into his eyes, blazing with a loneliness that matched her own, Sabine made the kind of impulsive decision she'd sworn off years ago. "Anywhere." She echoed, her heart thundering in her chest. His smile was answer enough. 3 hours later, they were on his private jet, Las Vegas bound, drunk on champagne and the intoxicating feeling of having found something rare and precious in a world determined to keep them apart. Chapter 2. What Happens in Vegas. Las Vegas. At 3 in the morning was a surreal wonderland of neon light. Sabine gazed out the limousine window as it glided down the strip, the champagne from the flight still buzzing in her veins. Beside her, Reese's hand enveloped hers, his thumb tracing patterns across her skin. "Having second thoughts?" he asked. Sabine turned to face him. "Third and fourth thoughts, actually. This isn't exactly how I planned my evening." "How did you plan it?" "Serve drinks, collect my pay, go home to practice for tomorrow's audition," she replied. Reese's expression clouded. "The audition? I didn't think." "It's fine," she interrupted. "It's not until late afternoon. I can catch the first flight back." His relief was palpable. "I'll make sure of it." The limousine pulled up to the Bellagio. Minutes later, they were swept into a private elevator that ascended to a suite occupying the entire top floor. "My God," Sabine breathed as they entered. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the Vegas skyline. "Do you always travel like this?" "Only when I'm running away with beautiful dancers," Reese replied, removing his jacket. Sabine laughed. "That happens often, does it?" "First time, actually." He moved to the bar and poured 2 glasses of water. "We should probably hydrate after all that champagne." 30 minutes later, they were back in the limousine. Sabine had changed into a simple black dress that Reese had somehow procured for her. "Are you going to tell me where we're going?" she asked as the bright lights of the strip receded. "Patience," Reese replied, the moonlight catching the playful glint in his eyes. "Some surprises are worth waiting for." The limousine turned onto a private airfield where a helicopter waited. They reached the Grand Canyon just as dawn broke, the sun transforming the rock from shadow to flame. "How did you arrange this so quickly?" Sabine asked, breathless from the view. Reese shrugged. "Money opens doors, but it's knowing what matters to people that makes an experience meaningful." They sat together on the edge of the canyon as Sabine studied Reese's profile. "I don't know you at all," she said honestly, "and yet I'm sitting thousands of feet above the ground, watching the sunrise with you. Sometimes we recognize something in another person that words can't explain," he replied. "A kindred spirit. Is that what I am? Your kindred spirit?" Reese turned to face her, his expression unexpectedly vulnerable. "I don't know what you are, Sabine Cove, but I know that when you looked at me last night, it was the first time in years I felt like someone was actually seeing me." Their kiss was gentler than the one on the balcony, a quiet exploration rather than a sudden ignition. They returned to Las Vegas as the city was waking, exploring the sights together. They played roulette at the Venetian, rode the roller coaster at New York, New York, and shared cotton candy on the promenade. As day faded into evening, they found themselves at a small bar with a live jazz band, swaying together on the dance floor. Sabine moved with the natural grace of her training, while Reese matched her with surprisingly smooth steps. "You dance," she observed, pleasure warming her voice. "Ballroom lessons were part of my education," he admitted, "though I've never enjoyed it quite this much before." Several cocktails later, they stumbled laughing from the bar. A small wedding chapel glowed across the street, its neon sign promising eternal love in 30 minutes or less. "It's so tacky," Sabine giggled, leaning against Reese's solid frame. "Gloriously tacky," he agreed. Their eyes met, humor giving way to something deeper. "We wouldn't," Sabine whispered, but there wasn't much conviction in her voice. "Of course not," Reese replied, even as he took a step toward the chapel. "That would be absurd, completely absurd," she echoed, following him. They stood before the chapel door, the neon casting pink and blue shadows across their faces. Reese's expression grew serious, his fingers intertwining with hers. "Unless sometimes life gives you one perfect moment, and the only mistake is not seizing it." The next hours passed in a blur. An Elvis impersonator sang as they exchanged vows written on cocktail napkins. Plastic rings were exchanged until Reese slipped a more substantial band on her finger. "Just a loner," he promised, "until you choose what you want." Morning arrived with harsh clarity. Sabine woke slowly, becoming aware of three things. She was naked, she was not alone, and there was a weight on her left hand that hadn't been there 2 days ago. On the nightstand lay a marriage certificate with both their signatures. Reality crashed over her. What had she done? She was married to a man she'd known for less than 48 hours, a billionaire who would surely regret this reckless decision. She slipped from the bed and began gathering her clothes, trying to leave quietly. Running away already, Mrs. Thor. Reese's voice stopped her. Sabine turned to find him watching her. "This was a mistake," she said. "We were drunk, caught up in the moment." "And if I don't think it was a mistake?" he asked, rising from the bed. "Don't be ridiculous. You're Reese Thor. You don't marry dancers you meet at charity galas." "Apparently I do." He crossed to her. "I know you're brilliant and brave, and that you make me feel more alive than I have in years. That's not enough for a marriage." "Perhaps not," he conceded, reaching for her hand. "But it's enough for breakfast. Stay, let's talk." Something in his voice, a note of genuine vulnerability, made Sabine hesitate. "Just breakfast?" she agreed reluctantly. "Just breakfast," he echoed, lifting her hand to press a kiss to her palm. "And then, if you still want to walk away, I won't stop you." As he disappeared into the bathroom, Sabine glanced down at the ring on her finger. What had begun as an impulsive adventure had become something infinitely more complicated. Because, despite all logic and reason, a small part of her didn't want to walk away at all. Chapter 3. The proposition breakfast arrived on a silver cart. Sabine sat across from Reese at a small table by the window, the Las Vegas skyline spread before them. She'd borrowed one of his shirts, the crisp fabric swimming on her dancer's frame. "So," Reese said, pouring coffee into delicate cups, "let's talk about our situation." Sabine wrapped her hands around the warm cup. "You mean the fact that we got drunk and married after knowing each other for all of 24 hours? "Yes, that situation." His lips curved slightly. "I assume you want an annulment, don't you?" Reese leaned back, studying her. "What if I said no?" Sabine nearly choked on her coffee. "You can't be serious." "I'm not suggesting we stay married forever," he clarified. "But what if we gave it some time? 6 months, perhaps." 6 months. Sabine set down her cup with force. "Why would we do that?" "Because there was something between us from the moment we met," Reese replied. "Something I've never felt before. I'm not ready to dismiss it as a drunken mistake." Sabine shook her head. "This isn't a romantic comedy, Reese. People don't just decide to stay married to strangers." "We're not exactly strangers anymore," he pointed out, his eyes briefly traveling over her in a way that made heat rush to her cheeks. "Sex doesn't equal intimacy," she countered. "I agree, which is why I'm suggesting time, to see if what we felt has substance." Sabine studied him. "Is this about appearances? Would an immediate annulment damage your business reputation?" Hurt flashed across Reese's features. "My business would survive. This isn't about Thor Industries." "Then what?" Reese leaned forward, his gaze intense. "When was the last time you did something that wasn't calculated, Sabine? Something purely because it felt right?" The question struck home. Her life as a dancer was disciplined to the extreme. Every meal, every hour of sleep, every penny carefully measured. "Let's be practical," she said. "I have an apartment in Brooklyn, a career I'm building, auditions lined up, none of which would need to change. You expect me to believe you'd be fine with a wife who lives in a different borough and works constantly?" "I expect you to believe I'm interested in knowing you, the real you." He joined her at the window. "And I'm prepared to make it worth your while." Suspicion flared. "Are you trying to buy me?" "No," he responded firmly. I'm acknowledging reality. Your career as a dancer is important to you, but it's financially precarious. If you give our marriage 6 months at the end, if you choose to leave, I'll provide enough capital for you to open your own dance studio. The offer hit Sabine like a physical blow. A studio of her own, the dream she'd nursed since childhood. That's bribery, she whispered, without conviction. It's security, Reese corrected. Consider it a pre-agreed divorce settlement. And what do you get out of this arrangement? Reese's expression softened. Time with you. No expectations beyond that. 6 months is a long time to play pretend, Sabine said, crossing her arms. Then let's not pretend. He stepped closer. Let's agree to be honest with each other, to genuinely attempt to build something real, and at the end of 6 months, we decide together whether to make it permanent or to part ways as friends. His hand came up to touch her cheek. No regrets, no resentment. Sabine closed her eyes, overwhelmed. The practical part of her brain screamed that this was madness. But another part whispered of possibilities, of taking a leap of faith. I need time to think, she said. Of course. Reese moved back. Take the morning. Left alone, Sabine paced the suite, weighing her options. When had she last done something truly daring? Not since she was 16 and left home against her mother's wishes to pursue dance in New York. She thought of Reese, of the vulnerable honesty in his eyes when he spoke of people seeing only his wealth. Was it possible this bizarre situation was offering her something genuine? By the time Reese returned, Sabine had made her decision. I have conditions, she said. A smile tugged at his lips. I expected nothing less. This isn't a business merger. If we do this, we do it as a real relationship. No separate residences, no living separate lives. Surprise flickered across his face. You'd move into my penthouse? Yes. I'll maintain my apartment for dance practice, but I'll live with you. I want a real chance to know if what I felt last night was real or just champagne and fantasy. Agreed, Reese said. And no prenup. This clearly startled him. Sabine, my assets are— I don't want your money, Reese, she interrupted. Not beyond what you've already offered for the studio. If this doesn't work out, I walk away with exactly what we— Agreed, nothing more. Why is this important to you? Because I need to know you're not protecting yourself from me at every turn, that you're as vulnerable in this as I am. Reese studied her, then slowly nodded. All right. No prenup. One more thing, Sabine said. Don't treat me like I'm made of glass. I don't need protecting from your world. I need honesty, even when it's difficult. That works both ways, he countered. I want to know the real Sabine, not just the polished performer. The real me isn't always pretty, she warned. Reese's smile deepened. I think I can handle it. Sabine extended her hand. 6 months, starting today. Instead of shaking her hand, Reese took it gently and raised it to his lips. Mrs. Thor, he murmured against her skin. Reese arranged for the private jet to take Sabine back to New York for her audition, promising to follow the next day. At the airport, he pulled her into a kiss that left her breathless, alone on the jet. Sabine touched her fingers to her lips. What had she agreed to? 6 months married to a stranger who made her heart race and her common sense flee. As New York came into view, Sabine felt a curious mix of trepidation and excitement. She had left as Sabine Cove, struggling dancer. She was returning as Sabine Thor, wife of one of the most powerful men in the city. 6 months to discover if their impulsive Vegas connection could grow into something real. The ring on her finger caught the sunlight as the plane began its descent. 6 months. The clock was ticking. Chapter 4. Two worlds. Collide. Sabine stood frozen in the private elevator that ascended to the penthouse, Reese's penthouse, where she would now be living. Her meager belongings had been delivered earlier that day. The doors slid open, revealing Reese waiting for her, his suit jacket discarded, sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms. "Welcome home," he said. The simple words weighted with significance. Sabine stepped out of the elevator, conscious of her worn dance bag and casual clothes. "This doesn't feel real," she admitted. "It'll take time." Reese took her bag from her shoulder. "I've cleared space for you in the master suite, but if you'd prefer your own room—" "No," Sabine interrupted. "If we're doing this, we're doing it properly. No half measures." The penthouse was impressive. Spanning the entire top floor of an exclusive building, it featured floor-to-ceiling windows, showcasing a panoramic view of the city. The kitchen. Reese gestured to a space with gleaming countertops. "I rarely use it, but my housekeeper stocks. The basics." "You have a housekeeper?" Sabine asked. "Maria comes 3 times a week. If you'd prefer more privacy—" "No, it's fine," Sabine assured him. "I'm just adjusting to the idea of having staff." The tour continued through a formal dining room, a library, a home office, and finally the master suite. A king-sized bed dominated the space, facing another wall of windows. "Your things are in here." Reese opened a door to reveal a walk-in closet, where her few pieces of clothing looked small against the expanse of empty shelves. "We can shop for anything you need." "I don't need fancy clothes," she protested. "Not for my sake," he agreed, "but there will be events where they might be useful." Reality crashed over Sabine. Events, cameras, the inevitable public scrutiny that would come with being Reese Thor's wife. "We'll take it slowly," he promised. "No public appearances until you're ready." But the world had other plans. The very next morning, as Sabine was preparing to leave for dance class, her phone exploded with notifications. Their marriage had been discovered by the press, with headlines ranging from Thor's secret Vegas wedding to the more vicious, "Who is the gold digger who snared Manhattan's most eligible bachelor?" When Reese found her, she was sitting on the edge of the bed, phone clutched in white-knuckled fingers. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "My PR team is working on damage control." "Damage control," Sabine echoed. "Is that what I am? Damage?" "No." Reese sat beside her. "You're my wife, but I should have anticipated this would leak faster than we planned. They're calling me a gold digger," her voice caught, "saying I must have— I'll have my lawyers—" "No," Sabine interrupted. "No lawyers. No statements. I don't want to draw more attention." "Then what do you want?" She squared her shoulders. "I want to go to my dance class and hold my head high. I won't hide like I've done something wrong." Reese studied her with admiration. "Then let me provide security, at least for today. The paparazzi can be aggressive." The next few days settled into an uneasy rhythm. The press continued their speculation, but the initial furor dimmed somewhat when no scandal emerged. A week after moving in, Sabine discovered something unexpected. In a small room she had assumed was a guest bedroom, she found a collection of large framed photographs, her photographs, action shots from performances she barely remembered. She was studying one particularly striking image when Reese's voice came from behind her. "You have extraordinary extension," he said quietly. Sabine turned. "How long have you had these?" Reese hesitated. "I bought the first one about 6 months ago, at a charity auction for your dance company. The rest I commissioned from the same photographer." "6 months ago," Sabine repeated. "Long before the gala where we met," he nodded. "I saw you perform. You were incandescent. I made a point of attending several performances after that." "You knew who I was that night at the gala," she realized. "It wasn't a chance meeting at all." "The meeting was chance," Reese corrected. "I had no idea you would be working the event, but yes, I recognized you immediately." Sabine didn't know whether to feel flattered or manipulated. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I was going to, eventually. But then everything happened so quickly, and I was afraid it would seem calculated." "It is a little creepy," she admitted, "to think you were watching me for months." Not watching, he clarified. Admiring, from a respectful distance. Despite herself, Sabine felt a smile forming. The great Rhys Thor, stalking a dancer from Brooklyn. Appreciating, he corrected, a matching smile appearing. I never approached you, never interfered. I just couldn't look away. The raw honesty in his voice made something warm unfurl in Sabine's chest. There was something touching about the idea that he had seen her, truly seen her, long before he knew her name. Show me your favorite, she requested softly. Rhys led her to a photograph at the far end of the room. In it, Sabine was captured in a moment of perfect stillness, her body balanced on one leg, arms extended, face lifted toward the light. I've never seen myself like this, she whispered. This is how I see you, Rhys replied, his voice intimate, strong, graceful, completely in your element. The air between them thickened with unspoken emotion. Since her move to the penthouse, they had maintained a careful physical distance. Sabine turned to face him, finding his eyes dark with desire and something deeper. Rhys, she said softly. In answer, he stepped closer, one hand coming up to cup her cheek. May I kiss you, Sabine Thor? The use of her married name sent a shiver through her. Yes, she breathed. Their lips met in a kiss that began tentatively but quickly deepened. Rhys's arms encircled her, drawing her against his body. Sabine's hands found their way to his shoulders, then his hair, fingers threading through the thick strands. That night, as moonlight spilled across their bed, they surrendered to desire that had been building since their first encounter. Rhys traced the dancer's muscles of her body with reverent fingers, whispering against her skin how she moved like poetry. Sabine explored him with equal wonder, discovering the man beneath the tailored suits. Their lovemaking was both tender and fierce, a dance of passion and vulnerability. Afterward, wrapped in tangled sheets in each other's arms, they shared their deepest fears, his of never being loved for himself, hers of losing her identity in his world. When tears filled her eyes at the intensity of her feelings, Rhys kissed them away one by one. You've awakened something in me I thought was dead, he confessed in the darkness, his voice raw with emotion. Sabine placed her hand over his heart, feeling its steady rhythm beneath her palm, and knew she was already falling dangerously, irrevocably, in love. Chapter 5. Beneath the surface. 3 weeks into their marriage, Sabine had adapted to parts of Rhys's world with surprising ease. The penthouse now contained touches of her presence, dance books on the coffee table, her favorite, tea in the kitchen. She shuttled between the penthouse and her dance commitments, gradually finding rhythm in their shared life. But Rhys himself remained something of an enigma. Though physically intimate, he maintained an emotional guardedness that frustrated her. He spoke freely of current events and business ventures, but rarely of his past or feelings. One evening, returning from rehearsal, Sabine found the penthouse empty except for a note. Working late. Don't wait up. Ah. It wasn't the first such note. In 3 weeks, there had been 5 nights when business had kept him away until early hours. Doubt crept in during these absences, fed by tabloid headlines that still speculated about their marriage. Hours later, Sabine was curled on the sofa with a novel when she heard the elevator doors open. Rhys entered looking exhausted, his appearance somewhat rumpled, tie loosened. You're still up, he observed with surprise. Couldn't sleep, she replied. Long day? The longest. He poured himself a scotch. Henderson's trying to back out of the Shanghai deal. Sabine watched him take a sip, noting the tense set of his shoulders. You work too hard, she said softly. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Someone has to. Why? The question slipped out before she could reconsider. You've built an empire, Rhys. You have more money than you could spend in 10 lifetimes. Why keep pushing so hard? He set down his glass with deliberate care. Because that's who I am. I build things, I solve problems. That's what you do, Sabine corrected gently, not who you are. Something flickered in his eyes, vulnerability quickly masked. It's late. We should get some sleep. But Sabine wasn't ready to let him retreat again. Tell me about your mother. The question clearly startled him. What? Your mother, she repeated. You've never mentioned your family, not once in 3 weeks. There's not much to tell. He turned away. I don't believe that. Sabine approached him. I've shared everything with you, my childhood in foster care, my struggle to afford dance lessons, but you remain a mystery. For a long moment, he simply looked at her, expression unreadable. Then something shifted in his eyes. Fine, he said abruptly. You want to know about my mother? Her name was Eleanor. She cleaned houses in Boston for families who had more money in their sofa cushions than we had in our bank account. She worked 3 jobs after my father left when I was 4. The words spilled out with an intensity that suggested they'd been contained too long. She died when I was 19, Reese continued. Massive heart attack. The doctors said it was likely brought on by years of stress and overwork. I was in my first year at MIT on scholarship. I couldn't even afford to give her a proper funeral. I made a promise at her grave, he said, staring past her, that I would never be helpless again, that I would build something that mattered, something that would have made her struggles worth it. When's her birthday? Sabine asked softly. March 18th. Why? Sabine checked her phone. That's tomorrow. Something like pain flashed across Reese's face. Yes. Is that why you've been working so hard lately? Trying to distract yourself? He didn't answer, but his silence was confirmation enough. Gently, Sabine took the glass from his hand and led him to the sofa. Tell me about her, Sabine encouraged. What was she like? Slowly, Reese began to speak. He described a woman of fierce determination and unexpected humor, who sang while she ironed clothes and who had taught herself to read Spanish from a battered dictionary. A woman who had never allowed her son to see how tired she truly was. She would have liked you, he said finally. She always said I was too serious, that I needed someone who could make me laugh. They talked deep into the night, the barriers between them thinning with each shared story. We're not so different, she observed as dawn began to lighten the sky. Both fighting our way up from nothing. Except I had my mother's love, Reese said quietly. That made all the difference. The next morning, Reese asked Sabine to accompany him to a small cemetery in Queens. The grave they stopped before was simple but well-maintained. The headstone read Eleanor Grace, Thor beloved mother, her strength was our shelter. Reese knelt before the stone, placing a small potted orchid. She loved flowers, he explained quietly, but thought cut ones were wasteful. Sabine knelt beside him, taking his hand in hers. They stayed for nearly an hour, Reese telling his mother about his life, his business, and finally, about Sabine. I'm not sure where it's leading, Mom, he admitted softly, but she makes me see the world differently. In the car returning to Manhattan, Reese seemed lighter, as if sharing the weight of his past had eased a burden. His hand found Sabine's, fingers intertwining naturally. Thank you for coming with me, he said. I've never taken anyone there before. That evening, their lovemaking took on a new dimension. Tender, unhurried, a true communion. Afterward, as Sabine lay in Reese's arms, she felt a shift in their relationship. Sabine, Reese murmured, I think I'm falling in love with you. The words cracked something open in Sabine's chest. Fear and joy mingled as she realized she was already there. I think I'm already there, she whispered back, her hand finding his heart. Whatever came next, whether their 6 months led to forever or to a gentle parting, Sabine knew that something profound had happened. Beneath the surface of their arranged marriage, real love had taken root. Chapter 6. The old flame Sabine's life settled into a rhythm over the next month. Mornings were spent at dance rehearsals. Afternoons often included private practice at her old apartment-turned-studio, and evenings belonged to Reese. The press had largely moved on to fresher scandals, though she still occasionally caught paparazzi. Lurking near the dance studio, the Thor Industries annual charity gala, ironically, the same event where she'd first met Reese, was approaching, and it would mark Sabine's official debut as Mrs. Thor. Despite her growing confidence, the thought of facing New York's elite on Reese's arm made her stomach knot with anxiety. "They're just people," Reese assured her as they shared breakfast on the penthouse balcony, the early summer sun warming their skin. "Wealthy, powerful people, but still just people. People who've been speculating about me for months," Sabine reminded him, absently stirring her coffee. "I've seen the headlines. Gold digger, fortune hunter, dancer who snagged a billionaire." Reese reached across the table to take her hand. "You'll outshine them all. Besides, I'll be right beside you." His faith in her was touching, but did little to quell her nerves. Later that day, she found herself in a high-end boutique, staring at her reflection in a floor-length mirror. The gown they'd selected was midnight blue, cut to showcase her dancer's physique while maintaining an elegant simplicity. "You look stunning," the stylist gushed. "Mr. Thor will be speechless." As if summoned by the mention of his name, Sabine's phone lit up with a message from Reese. "Running late. Meeting with unexpected visitor. See you at home." The gown was carefully packaged, and Sabine headed back to the penthouse. The elevator doors opened directly into the living room, where she froze at the scene before her. Reese sat on the sofa, his posture tense. Across from him was a woman of startling beauty, tall, blonde, impeccably dressed in a cream suit that screamed old money. They both looked up at Sabine's entrance, the woman's perfect features registering. Surprise, then cool assessment. "Ah," Reese stood quickly. "Sabine, this is Vivian Archer. Vivian, my wife, Sabine." "Wife?" The word still sent a small thrill through her despite the circumstances. "So you're real," Vivian said, her cultured voice carrying just a hint of mockery. "I thought perhaps you were an elaborate tax dodge." "Very real," Sabine replied, setting down her shopping bag. "And you are?" "An old friend," Vivian answered before Reese could speak. "Reese and I have known each other for years. Vivian and I were engaged." Reese clarified, his expression neutral. 3 years ago, the information hit Sabine like a physical blow. In all their conversations, he had never mentioned an engagement. "How interesting that he never mentioned me," Vivian observed, her smile as sharp as a blade. "But then Vegas marriages are so impulsive, aren't they? Hardly time for life histories." "Vivian," Reese's voice carried a warning, "I think we've concluded our business." "Have we?" She rose gracefully, collecting a sleek leather portfolio. "I suppose we have. For now." She turned to Sabine with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Lovely to meet you, Sabrina." "Sabine," she corrected automatically. "Of course." Vivian moved toward the elevator, then paused beside Sabine. "Word of advice? Don't get too comfortable. Reese's interest in novelty never lasts long." After she'd gone, a heavy silence descended on the penthouse. Sabine turned to Reese, who had the grace to look uncomfortable. "An engagement seems like something you might have mentioned," she said finally. "It was a long time ago," Reese replied, running a hand through his hair. "And it ended badly, not something I enjoy reminiscing about." "She seems to think otherwise." "Vivian sees what she wants to see." He moved toward Sabine, reaching for her hands. "Her father's company is struggling. She came to propose a merger." "A business merger? Or something more personal?" The question slipped out before Sabine could stop it. Reese's face softened. "There's nothing between Vivian and me. There hasn't been for years." Sabine wanted to believe him, but doubt had taken root. "Why did you end it?" He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "We wanted different things. She wanted a society marriage, appearances, connections, proper bloodlines. I wanted a partner. And now, his hands tightened on hers. Now I have one. The moment was interrupted by Sabine's phone ringing. She glanced at the screen. Her dance. "Company director, I need to take this," she said, stepping away from Reese. The call was brief but life-changing. When she disconnected, she turned to find Reese watching her intently. "What is it?" he asked. "That was Madeleine Laurent," Sabine said, her voice barely above a whisper. "She's the artistic director of Ballet Nouveau." "The company in Paris?" Reese's eyebrows rose. "They want me to audition for a principal role in their new production." The words felt unreal even as she spoke them. It's the opportunity of a lifetime." "That's wonderful." Reese's genuine enthusiasm was evident. "When is the audition?" "Next week, in Paris." Sabine bit her lip. "It would mean leaving right after the gala. Then we'll make sure you're on the first flight out." Reese crossed to her, cupping her face in his hands. "This is what you've worked for, Sabine. I won't stand in your way." His support warmed her, but something nagged at the back of her mind. "It's strange timing, isn't it? Right after Vivian shows up?" Confusion crossed Reese's face. "What do you mean?" "This kind of opportunity doesn't just happen. Someone had to recommend me pull strings." Understanding dawned in his eyes. "You think Vivian arranged it to get you out of the way?" "It makes sense, doesn't it? She wants you back. She finds a way to send me to Paris." Sabine's mind raced with possibilities. "Maybe she knows someone at the company, or—" "Sabine," Reese interrupted gently, "you earned this. Your talent earned this. Don't let Vivian's appearance taint your achievement." She wanted to believe him, but doubt had taken root. Later that evening, after Reese had fallen asleep, Sabine slipped from their bed and padded to the kitchen, her mind still churning. A quick internet search confirmed her suspicions. Vivian's family foundation was a major donor to Ballet Nouveau. It couldn't be coincidence. The next morning, Sabine made a decision. She would confront Vivian directly. A few calls to Reese's assistant, and she had an address, an elegant townhouse in the Upper East Side. Vivian received her in a sunlit sitting room, seemingly unsurprised by the visit. "Mrs. Thor, to what do I owe this pleasure?" "Ballet Nouveau," Sabine said without preamble. "That was your doing, wasn't it?" A smile curled Vivian's perfect lips. "Aren't you the clever one?" "Yes, I made a call. Consider it a wedding gift." "A gift that takes me to another continent?" "How?" "Thoughtful. It's a genuine opportunity," Vivian replied, sipping her tea. "Your talent is not in question. But let's be honest, Reese will tire of playing house with his dancer bride. When he does, wouldn't you rather have a prestigious career to fall back on?" The calculated cruelty of it stung, but Sabine maintained her composure. "And what makes you so certain he'll tire of me?" "Experience, darling." Vivienne set down her cup. "I've known Reese for a decade. He's brilliant, driven, and utterly dedicated to his empire. His marriage to you is a lovely diversion, but ultimately he needs a partner who understands his world." "Someone like you?" "Precisely. We make sense together. We always have." Vivian leaned forward, her voice softening with false sympathy. "I'm offering you a dignified exit. The starring role is yours if you agree to file for divorce before leaving for Paris. You'll have your career and a generous settlement. I'll see to that." Anger flared hot in Sabine's chest. "You think you can buy me off? That I'd trade Reese for a ballet role?" "Everyone has a price," Vivian replied with calm certainty. "You're a pragmatist, Sabine. We both know this marriage has an expiration date. I'm simply offering you a softer landing." Sabine rose, steadying herself against the sudden urge to upset Vivian's perfectly arranged tea service. "Keep your role, your money, and your assumptions. Reese isn't a prize to be won or traded." "Then you're a fool," Vivian called after. her as she headed for the door. Love doesn't last, Sabine, especially not when it's built on a vagus impulse. The words followed Sabine as she fled the townhouse, hailing a taxi with shaking hands. Back at the penthouse, she retreated to the home studio Reese had converted from a guest room, losing herself in dance, as she had done since childhood whenever emotions threatened to overwhelm her. That evening, Sabine found sanctuary in their home studio, losing herself in dance, her body expressing the turmoil her words could not. Unbeknownst to her, Reese watched from the doorway, mesmerized by the raw emotion in every movement. When she finally collapsed in exhaustion, he gathered her into his arms, carrying her to their bed, where he worshipped her body with exquisite attentiveness, his touch communicating what words could not, his absolute adoration of her spirit and form. In the velvet darkness afterward, tangled in silk sheets and each other, Sabine confessed the offer and its condition. Tracing the contours of his face, she watched conflict and sacrifice war in his eyes. "I've never known love like this," she whispered, pressing her lips to the hollow of his throat, feeling his pulse race beneath her touch. "But dancing has been my sanctuary since I was a child, the only place I truly belonged before you." Reese cradled her face in his palms with such tenderness it brought tears to her eyes. "Your passion for dance is part of why I love you," he said, voice rough with emotion. "I would never cage a bird meant to soar." Gathering her closer, their heartbeats synchronizing, he insisted she take the opportunity, even if it meant their separation, proving he values her happiness above his own. "I'll make my own decision," Sabine said firmly, "with no interference from Vivian or anyone else." "The audition is still yours if you want it," Reese assured her. "Regardless of Vivian's motives, this could be a pivotal moment in your career." As dawn broke, they made love again with desperate intensity, as if trying to imprint themselves on each other's souls, a memory to sustain them through potential separation. Sabine realized with stunning clarity that the choice before her wasn't between dance and Reese, but between a dream she'd always known and a love she never imagined possible. The next morning, Sabine made her call to Ballet Nouveau, accepting the audition but insisting on negotiating her own terms. To Vivian, a brief message: "I don't need your gift. I've earned this opportunity, and I'm keeping my husband too." And finally, to Reese, the words that had been growing in her heart since that impulsive night in Vegas: "I don't need a billionaire husband. I need only you." Chapter 7. Distance makes the heart grow fonder. The Thor Industries charity gala arrived like a gathering storm, inevitable and imposing. Sabine stood before the bedroom mirror, barely recognizing herself in the midnight blue gown that shimmered with each breath. Her hair had been swept up by a stylist, emphasizing the elegant line of her neck and the diamond earrings Reese had presented her with that morning. "Something to remind you of me in Paris," he'd said, his eyes warm with pride and a tinge of sadness. The weeks following Vivienne's proposition had been a whirlwind. Sabine had accepted the audition, but refused Vivienne's conditions, insisting on maintaining both her marriage and her autonomy. Ballet Nouveau had agreed to her terms, though Sabine suspected Reese might have made some calls of his own. She hadn't asked, and he hadn't volunteered the information. A mutual respect for boundaries they'd established. "Ready?" Reese appeared in the doorway, resplendent in a tailored tuxedo that accentuated his powerful frame. Even after months of marriage, the sight of him still made Sabine's heart quicken. "As I'll ever be," she replied, smoothing non-existent wrinkles from her dress. Reese crossed the room to stand behind her, their reflections forming a portrait of striking contrasts, his dark strength against her golden beauty. "You're going to astonish them," he murmured, pressing a kiss to her bare shoulder. "Just as you astonish me every day." The gala was held at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, its grand entrance illuminated by floodlights and lined with photographers. Inside, the museum had been transformed into an ethereal wonderland. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across marble floors, while elaborate floral arrangements scented the air with subtle perfume. Rhys kept Sabine close as they moved through the crowd, his hand a reassuring presence at the small of her back. He introduced her with simple pride. "My wife, Sabine." No explanations, no qualifiers, just quiet conviction that she belonged at his side. "Mrs. Thor." A familiar voice cut through the pleasantries. "How lovely to see you again." "Vivian." Archer approached, resplendent in a crimson gown that clung to her willowy frame. On her arm was an older man with silver hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. As the night progressed, Rhys was inevitably pulled away by business associates, leaving Sabine momentarily alone near the champagne fountain. She was contemplating whether to seek him out when Vivian materialized at her side. "You surprised me tonight," Vivian said, sipping champagne. "You handle yourself well." "Don't sound so shocked," Sabine replied dryly. "I may not have been born into this world, but I'm a quick study." Evidently, Vivian's gaze was assessing. "Have you reconsidered my offer?" "There's nothing to reconsider. I'm auditioning on my own merits, and I'm staying married to Rhys. For now," Vivian conceded. "But Paris is far away, and Rhys is susceptible when lonely." Before Sabine could respond, Rhys returned to her side, his expression darkening as he registered Vivian's presence. "Everything all right?" "Perfect," Sabine assured him, taking his arm. Vivian was just sharing her thoughts on long-distance relationships. The next day passed in a flurry of last-minute preparations for Paris. Sabine's scheduled departure was less than 24 hours away, and the reality of their impending separation hung over the penthouse like a storm cloud. "It's only for a few weeks," she reminded him as they shared dinner on the balcony, the city lights creating a glittering backdrop. "If I get the role, we can discuss next steps then." Rhys nodded, but something in his expression suggested he was already anticipating her success and the inevitable decisions that would follow. Ballet Nouveau would expect her to relocate to Paris if she secured a principal position. "I've been thinking," he said carefully, swirling the wine in his glass. "Thor Industries has been considering a European expansion. Paris would be a logical headquarters." Sabine's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "Rhys, you can't reorganize your entire company just to follow me to Paris." "Not the entire company," he clarified, "just a new division. It's been in the planning stages for months." "Since when?" A flicker of discomfort crossed his face. "Since Vivian showed up." Understanding dawned. "You've been preparing for this. You knew I'd go to Paris." "I hoped you would," he corrected. "Because it's what you deserve. I just wanted to make sure that if you did, we would have options." The thoughtfulness of it, the quiet planning to ensure their marriage could weather her success, touched Sabine deeply. For the first time, she allowed herself to truly believe that what they had might last beyond their initial 6-month agreement. That night, their lovemaking held a new urgency, a desperate need to memorize each other before their separation. Their goodbye at the airport was briefer than either would have liked, constrained by security protocols and Rhys's unavoidable conference call. One last, lingering kiss, and then Sabine was through security, looking back to see Rhys watching her, his tall figure motionless amid the airport chaos. Paris welcomed her with unexpected warmth for early autumn. The city was everything she had imagined, elegant, romantic, steeped in history and art. Le Meurice was palatial, her suite overlooking the Tuileries gardens in regal splendor. But as Sabine unpacked her dance gear that evening, the opulence felt hollow without Rhys to share it. The first week passed in a blur of rehearsals and preliminary auditions. Ballet Nouveau was housed in a magnificent old theatre near the opera. Garnier, its studios flooded with natural light that streamed through arched windows. The company's reputation for demanding excellence was well earned. By the end of each day, Sabine's muscles screamed in protest, and her point shoes were stained with fresh blood. Rhys called every evening, his voice a lifeline across the ocean. He described board meetings and development projects, asked detailed questions about her rehearsals, and always ended with the same quiet affirmation, "I miss you, Sabine Thor." 2 weeks into her Paris sojourn, disaster struck. The artistic director, Madame Laurent, had been working Sabine and the other principal candidates mercilessly, preparing them for the final audition. During a particularly challenging sequence, Sabine felt something tear in her calf, a searing pain that sent her crashing to the floor. The company doctor diagnosed a moderate strain, not serious enough to end her chances, but requiring at least 3 days of complete rest. Sabine returned to the hotel in despair, facing the reality that her competitors would be perfecting their performances while she was confined to ice packs and elevation. "It's over," she told Rhys during their nightly call, fighting back tears. "They won't wait for me to recover." "Have they said that?" His voice was calm, steadying. "No, but then it's not over," he interrupted firmly. "Rest, heal, show them what resilience looks like." His confidence sustained her through 3 agonizing days of forced inactivity. When she finally returned to the studio, Madame Laurent worked her harder than ever, as if testing whether injury had weakened her resolve. It hadn't. If anything, the setback had sharpened Sabine's determination to prove herself worthy. The night before the final audition, Sabine was attempting to quiet her nerves with a hot bath when a knock came at her suite door. Wrapping herself in the hotel's plush robe, she answered to find a bellhop holding an enormous bouquet of white roses and a small package. The card with the flowers read simply, "Dance like no one is watching, even though I wish I could be. All my love are." The package contained a delicate gold chain with a small pendant, a perfect miniature of a dancer in mid-leap. Sabine clasped it around her neck, the metal warm against her skin, and felt oddly protected, as if Rhys had found a way to be with her after all. The final audition was held on the main stage, with the entire artistic staff watching from the darkened auditorium. Sabine, wearing the pendant beneath her simple black leotard, moved through her variation with a transcendent quality that silenced even the most critical judges. When the music ended, she held her final pose for a breathless moment before Madame. Laurent's voice cut through the silence. "Bien. Very good, Madame Thor. We will notify all candidates of our decision by tomorrow evening." Exhausted but exhilarated, Sabine returned to her hotel to find a message waiting from Rhys. "Whatever happens, I'm proud of you. Call when you can." But before she could reach for her phone, dizziness overtook her. A wave of fatigue so profound that she barely made it to the bed before everything went black. She woke to the hotel phone ringing insistently. Disoriented, Sabine fumbled for the receiver, her throat parched and head pounding. "Madame Thor?" The concierge's voice was concerned. "Your husband has been trying to reach you for hours. He's quite worried." "What time is it?" Sabine managed, struggling to focus. "Nearly 9 in the evening, madame. Shall I put him through?" 9. She'd been unconscious for over 5 hours. "Yes, please." Rhys's voice was tight with worry. "Sabine, are you all right?" "I think so," she said, though her body felt leaden. I fell asleep. The audition must have taken more out of me than I realized." "You sound terrible," he said bluntly. "Have you eaten today?" Sabine tried to remember. There had been coffee before the audition, maybe a croissant. "Not really," she admitted. "That's it," Rhys declared. "I'm coming to Paris." "Don't be ridiculous," she protested weakly. "You have meetings all week. I'm just tired." "The meetings can wait." His tone brooked no argument. "I'll be on the next flight." Too exhausted to fight, Sabine agreed. She managed to order soup from room service before collapsing back into bed, her body betraying her with a weakness she'd never experienced. The doctor Reese dispatched to her suite diagnosed severe exhaustion combined with mild dehydration, not uncommon among dancers pushing themselves to extremes. He prescribed rest, fluids, and a complete break from physical activity for at least 48 hours. Reese arrived the following afternoon, his face tight with concern as he gathered her into his arms. "You scared me," he murmured into her hair. "I scared myself," Sabine admitted. "I've never pushed to the point of collapse before." He helped her to the sofa, where she curled against him, drawing comfort from his solid presence. "Ballet Nouveau called," she told him. "They've postponed their decision until I recover. Apparently, Madame Laurent was impressed enough to wait." "Of course she was," Reese said, stroking her hair. "Anyone with eyes could see you're exceptional." They spent the next 2 days in quiet companionship, venturing no further than the hotel restaurant. Reese worked remotely while Sabine rested, her strength returning gradually under his watchful care. On the third morning, Madame Laurent requested a meeting at the theatre. "Would you come with me?" Sabine asked Reese as she dressed carefully in a simple wrap dress, still feeling fragile. "Are you sure? This is your moment?" "Our moment," she corrected. "Whatever happens next affects both of us." The theatre was quiet when they arrived, most of the company already in rehearsal for the current production. Madame Laurent received them in her austere office, her keen eyes taking in Sabine's improved but still delicate appearance and Reese's protective stance beside her. "Monsieur Thor," she acknowledged with a slight nod. "I did not expect to meet you today." "My wife's health is my priority," he replied simply. Madame Laurent's expression softened marginally. "A sentiment I respect." She turned to Sabine. "Your collapse concerns me, Madame Thor. A principal dancer must have stamina as well as skill." Sabine straightened her spine. "I pushed too hard because I wanted this role more than I've wanted anything in my career. But I've never collapsed before, and I never will again. I know my limits now." The director studied her for a long moment. "Your audition was remarkable. There is a fire in your dancing that cannot be taught." She paused, glancing between them. "However, Ballet Nouveau requires complete commitment. Our principals relocate to Paris. There is no room for divided attention." Reese tensed beside her but remained silent. "This was Sabine's negotiation." "With respect, Madame Laurent," Sabine said carefully, "my marriage is not a distraction from my art. It's a foundation that supports it." "Pretty words," the director replied skeptically. "But Paris and New York are not neighboring villages." "No," Sabine agreed, "but Thor Industries has been planning a European expansion. My husband would split his time between the cities." Madame Laurent's eyebrows rose. "You would ask him to compromise his empire for your dancing?" "I'm not asking," Reese interjected quietly. "I'm offering, because some things matter more than business." Something shifted in the director's austere face, a softening around the eyes, a slight relaxation of her rigid posture. "My husband was also a businessman," she said unexpectedly. "For 40 years he arranged his meetings around my performances. Never once did he miss an opening night." She turned back to Sabine. "The role is yours if you want it. We begin rehearsals in 3 weeks. Full recovery is your only responsibility until then." Outside the theatre, Sabine stood frozen in disbelief as pedestrians streamed around them. "I got it," she whispered. "I actually got it." Reese gathered her into his arms, spinning her in a circle that drew smiles from passers-by. "Of course you did," he said, setting her down gently. "You're extraordinary." That evening they celebrated with dinner at the hotel's Michelin-starred restaurant. As champagne was poured, he raised his glass in toast. "To Ballet Nouveau's newest principal dancer," he said, his eyes shining with pride. "And to making Paris our second home." Sabine clinked her glass against his. "To us," she countered softly. As she met his gaze over the rim of her glass, she added the words that had been growing more certain in her heart with each passing day. "I don't need a billionaire husband. I need only you." Rhys's eyes grew suspiciously bright. He reached across the table to take her hand, his thumb tracing over the wedding ring she had never removed. "And you have me," he promised, "in New York, in Paris, wherever your dancing takes you." In that moment, Sabine knew with absolute certainty that what had begun as an impulsive Vegas wedding had become something neither of them had expected. A love strong enough to bridge oceans, and a partnership where both their dreams could flourish side by side. Chapter 8. The Ultimate Test. Just as Sabine and Rhys recommitted to each other, scandal erupted like a thunderclap. Sabine was on her way to meet friends from her old dance company when a text from an unknown number made her blood run cold. "Your husband isn't who you think." "He is. Check the Post." The New York Post's headline glared from her phone screen. "Thor's Parisian affair. Billionaire caught with mystery blonde while wife dances." Below were grainy photos. Unmistakably Rhys emerging from a Parisian hotel with a slender blonde woman, his hand at the small of her back in a gesture of intimate familiarity. Heartbroken, Sabine retreated to her old Brooklyn apartment instead of meeting her friends. The familiar neighborhood welcomed her with indifferent normalcy. The bodega on the corner, the laundromat with its broken sign, the stray cat that considered the building's front stoop its territory. Her apartment key still worked, though the space felt foreign after months in Rhys's penthouse and their Parisian flat. Dust had settled on the few pieces of furniture she'd left behind. Sabine sank to the floor, her back against the wall, and finally allowed the tears to come. Ugly, racking sobs that left her gasping for air. How could she have been so naive? Vivian's words echoed in her memory. Paris is far away, and Rhys is susceptible when lonely. Hours passed, the light shifting across the worn floorboards as afternoon faded into evening. Her phone had fallen, silent after dozens of missed calls and unanswered texts. Sabine sat in the growing darkness, replaying every moment of the past 5 months for signs she might have missed. The buzzer startled her from her numbed state. Instinctively, she knew it was Rhys. For a moment, she considered ignoring it, but some stubborn part of her needed to hear his explanation, even if it was just more lies. She buzzed him up, then positioned herself by the window, arms crossed, protectively over her chest. When the door opened, the sight of him nearly undid her resolve. Rhys looked wrecked, his normally impeccable appearance disheveled, his eyes haunted. "Sabine," he breathed, relief and anguish mingling in his voice. "Thank God, I've been looking everywhere." "Well, you found me," she replied, her voice flat. "Congratulations!" He took a step toward her, stopping when she flinched. "The photos," he said. "They're not what they look like." A harsh laugh escaped her. "That's what they all say, isn't it? The universal defense of cheating husbands since the dawn of time. I'm not cheating on you." Rhys's voice was raw. "I would never—" "Save it," Sabine interrupted. "I saw the pictures, Rhys. I saw your hand on her back, the exact same way you touch me. Don't insult my intelligence by denying it." "That woman is Elise Durant," Rhys said, his voice steady despite the pain in his eyes. "She's the lead architect for the Paris headquarters renovation. We had lunch to discuss the project. Then she accompanied me to view a potential residence for us." "In a hotel?" Sabine challenged. "The Ritz has a newly renovated suite that the realtor thought might give us ideas for our own place," Rhys explained. Elise came along to offer her professional opinion on the structural possibilities. The explanation sounded plausible, but doubt had taken firm root in Sabine's heart. Convenient, she said coldly. And I suppose you have proof? Yes, Reese replied, reaching into his jacket. He withdrew his phone and pulled up his calendar. Here's the appointment with the realtor. And here, he scrolled to his email, is the follow-up from Elise with her recommendations for the apartment renovations. Sabine glanced at the screen, then away. It proved nothing. Why didn't you tell me about this meeting? Because I wanted it to be a surprise, Reese admitted. I was going to show you the apartment next week when we returned to Paris. It has a studio space with perfect light for you to practice in on your days off. The sincerity in his voice made her waver, but years in foster care had taught Sabine not to trust easily. The photos look intimate, Reese. I was guiding her through the door, he interrupted. The photos are deliberately misleading. Deliberately, Sabine repeated. What do you mean? A shadow crossed Reese's face. I think we both know who would benefit from destroying our marriage. Vivian, Sabine whispered, the pieces falling into place. Reese nodded grimly. The timing is too perfect. These photos appear just as we're approaching the end of our 6-month agreement. Doubt warred with hope in Sabine's heart. She wanted desperately to believe him, but fear held her back. How can I know for sure? She asked, her voice barely audible. Call Elise, Reese suggested immediately. Talk to her yourself or the realtor. Check with the hotel about our appointment. He stepped closer, cautiously. Or you could choose to trust me, Sabine. Trust what we've built together. Trust that I love you too much to ever betray you this way. Before she could respond, Reese's phone rang. It's my lawyer. The Post is running a follow-up story tomorrow. I need to take this. He stepped into the hallway, closing the door partway but not completely. A small act of transparency that didn't go unnoticed. When he returned, his expression was grim. The legal team wants me to make a statement, issue a denial, threaten a lawsuit. All the usual tactics. And what do you want to do? Sabine asked. Reese met her gaze directly. I want to protect you from this ugliness. But more than that, I want to do whatever it takes to earn back your trust. The vulnerability in his expression struck Sabine to her core. This was not the face of a guilty man spinning excuses. I need time, she said finally, to think, to process. Disappointment flickered in his eyes, but he nodded. Of course, I'll go back to the penthouse. You can stay here if you prefer. At the threshold, he turned back. Sabine, he said softly, I've spent my entire adult life building walls to protect myself from getting hurt. Then you crashed into my world and somehow got past every defense I'd constructed. I would cut off my right arm before I would willingly hurt you. Please remember that while you're thinking. Then he was gone, the door closing with a quiet click behind him. Sleep eluded her that night. By dawn, she had reached a decision, though it brought her little peace. Reese answered her text immediately. Meet me at the penthouse at noon. When she arrived, she found him in the living room, standing by the windows that overlooked the city. He turned at the sound of the elevator, hope and fear warring in his expression. I've decided, Sabine said without preamble, her voice steadier than she felt. I'm going to the gala tonight. Confusion crossed his face. The Thor Industries Winter Gala was that evening, a major charity event they had both been expected to attend before the scandal broke. The gala, he repeated. I assumed we would cancel. No, Sabine cut him off. I want to go. As your wife. Understanding dawned slowly in his eyes. You believe me, he said, wonder in his voice. I choose to, Sabine clarified. And I refuse to let tabloid gossip dictate our lives. Reese crossed the room in 3 long strides, stopping just short of touching her. Sabine, he breathed, her name a prayer on his lips. She raised a hand to his cheek, the first contact she'd initiated since seeing those photos. I don't know if trust comes naturally to either of us, she said softly. But I'm choosing to believe in what we've built together, in us. The gala was held at the Natural History Museum, transformed into a winter wonderland of silver and blue. Every prominent figure in New York society would be there, including Sabine's suspected Vivian Archer. Her gown for the evening was a creation of silver sequins that caught the light with every movement, making her appear to be wrapped in starlight. Rhys, handsome in his tuxedo, watched her with undisguised adoration. "You look like a goddess," he said simply. They arrived fashionably late, making their entrance arm in arm, faces composed in serene unity, despite the scandal still circulating in whispers. Sabine felt the weight of 100 stares, but Rhys's solid presence beside her grounded her. Near the champagne fountain, they encountered Vivian. She stood with a group of society matrons, resplendent in emerald green that set off her golden hair. "Rhys," she greeted, her voice honey over steel. "And Sabine, how unexpected to see you both here tonight." "Why unexpected?" Rhys asked pleasantly. "We're celebrating the Foundation's work, just as we do every year." "Well, given the unfortunate publicity," Vivian trailed off delicately. "Such a shame how the media twists innocent situations." Something in her tone confirmed what Sabine had suspected. She stepped forward, her own smile as sharp as a blade. "Yes, it is a shame," Sabine agreed, almost as if someone deliberately tipped off photographers to create a specific narrative. Color bloomed high on Vivienne's perfect cheekbones. "What an imagination you have," she said with a brittle laugh. "I didn't miss my calling," Sabine replied evenly. "I'm exactly where I'm meant to be, with my husband." Senator Blackwood appeared, his shrewd gaze taking in the tableau. "Thor, there are some investors who've been asking after you. Mind if I steal you away for a moment?" After Rhys reluctantly departed with the senator, Vivian's mask of civility slipped further. "You're making a mistake," she said, her voice low. "Men like Rhys don't change their nature for a passing infatuation. The man I know is loyal, honest, and capable of more love than he even realizes. The man you know is a carefully curated facade," Vivian hissed. "He builds things, acquires them, grows bored, and moves on. Then perhaps you never really knew him at all." Sabine's tone was pitying. "Because the man I married has depth and capacity for growth that would astound you." Their confrontation was interrupted by a commotion near the podium. Rhys had taken the stage. Though he wasn't scheduled to speak until much later, the room quieted as he tapped the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the interruption," he began, his voice steady and clear. "I had planned to save my remarks for later, but there's something I need to address." Sabine's heart raced as she realized what he was doing. Vivian beside her had gone rigid with tension. "Many of you have seen the recent tabloid coverage suggesting impropriety in my marriage," Rhys continued. "I want to be clear. Those insinuations are categorically false. The photos show a business meeting regarding Thor Industries' Paris expansion, nothing more." A murmur ran through the crowd. Rhys's gaze found Sabine in the audience, his eyes never leaving hers as he continued. "I've spent my life building a company, brick by brick, deal by deal, but nothing I've ever built compares to the relationship I've found with my wife, Sabine." Tears pricked Sabine's eyes as Rhys continued, his voice growing passionate. "She reminds me daily that true wealth isn't measured in stock portfolios or property holdings, but in the courage to be vulnerable, to love without reservation, to choose someone every single day." The room had gone utterly silent, hundreds of New York's elite transfixed by the raw emotion from a man many had considered coldly calculating. "I would sacrifice every company, every building, every dollar to my name before I would betray her trust," Rhys declared. "And to anyone who would try to come between us, His gaze flickered briefly toward Vivian. "You should know that you're not just fighting against me. You're fighting against the strongest force I've ever known, the love between two people who chose each other when the odds were against them." Sabine felt rather than saw Vivienne slip away, defeat written in every line of her body. The crowd erupted in applause as Rhys stepped down from the podium, moving purposefully through the throng towards Sabine. When he reached her, Sabine was already moving into his arms, public scrutiny forgotten, as they clung to each other in the center of the ballroom. "I'm sorry," he whispered against her hair. "I know public declarations aren't your style, but I couldn't let her poison what we have." "It was perfect," Sabine assured him, her heart so full it threatened to burst. "You were perfect." That night, rain fell in sheets as they returned to her tiny Brooklyn apartment, both unwilling to face the penthouse with its echoes of doubt. In the familiar space that had once been just hers, they reconnected with an intensity born of fear and relief. Their bodies collided as months of passion and days of anguish culminated in a desperate embrace. They made love with wild abandon, clothes torn, bodies slick with rain and tears, whispered apologies and declarations melting into moans of pleasure. Then again with aching tenderness, memorizing each other anew, healing wounds with gentle caresses and fervent kisses. In the quiet aftermath, limbs entangled on her narrow bed, Rhys traced the curve of her cheek. "My heart lives inside you," he confessed, voice thick with emotion. Sabine placed his hand over her thundering heart. "And mine has belonged to you since that first night," she whispered. As dawn broke, they lay facing each other, foreheads touching, breathing each other's air, a recognition profound in its simplicity that they'd found their home not in penthouse suites or dance studios, but in each other's arms. Chapter 9. The Choice. The scandal faded as quickly as it had erupted. Rhys's public declaration of love, combined with a scathing exposé revealing Vivian's connection to the tabloid photographer, had transformed public opinion. The gossip columns that had once eagerly dissected their marriage now portrayed them as a modern fairy tale, the billionaire and the dancer who had found genuine love against all odds. Winter settled over New York, transforming the city into a glittering wonderland of light and shadow. Sabine and Rhys fell into a comfortable rhythm, dividing their time between rehearsals with Ballet Nouveau in Paris and the growing European division of Thor Industries. The apartment Rhys had been viewing with the architect was now their Parisian home, the renovations nearly complete on the dance studio that would allow Sabine to practice privately on her days off. As the 6-month mark of their Vegas wedding approached, neither mentioned the looming deadline of their original agreement. The studio Rhys had promised her as a divorce settlement was now simply a gift between loving spouses. The papers drawn up in his name alone, but with Sabine given full operational control. "I want it to be yours completely," he explained as they reviewed the final documents over breakfast in their Paris apartment. "No strings, no conditions." Sabine studied his face across the table, still sometimes struck by the journey that had brought them here. "You know I don't need grand gestures anymore," she said softly. "Not when I have you." Rhys's smile was tender as he reached for her hand. "It's not a gesture. It's an acknowledgement that your talent deserves a home." The studio was located in a converted warehouse in Brooklyn with soaring ceilings, floors specially designed for dancers, and windows that flooded the space with natural light. Sabine had already begun considering programs she might offer, classes for children from underprivileged backgrounds like herself, scholarships for promising dancers who couldn't afford traditional training, space for experimental choreographers to develop new work. "We could name it after your mother," she suggested one evening as they walked along the Seine, bundled against the February chill. "The Eleanor Thor Dance Center." Rhys's steps faltered, emotion flickering across his face. She would have loved that, he said finally, almost as much as she would have loved you. The world tour that Ballet Nouveau had been planning was now just weeks away, 3 months across Europe, Asia, and America. Madame Laurent had made it clear that Sabine's role as principal dancer required full commitment to the tour schedule, with only brief breaks between cities. "Will you be able to join me at all?" Sabine asked Rhys as they packed her costumes in their New York penthouse, preparations for the tour consuming their final days before her departure. "I've arranged to meet you in London, Tokyo, and San Francisco," he replied, carefully folding a delicate tutu into a specialized trunk. "And I'll fly in for shorter visits when I can." Sabine nodded, fighting the familiar pang at the thought of their separation. Though they had mastered the art of maintaining their connection across distance, 3 months would be their longest time apart since Vegas. The night before her departure, Rhys surprised her with dinner at the small Italian restaurant where they had shared their first proper New York date months earlier. The owner greeted them like old friends, leading them to a secluded corner table adorned with white roses, Sabine's favorite. "For courage," Rhys had explained when he first gifted them to her before an important audition. The tradition had continued, white roses marking every significant moment in their relationship. As they lingered over tiramisu, Sabine noticed Rhys growing increasingly pensive, his gaze often drifting to her face as if memorizing her features. "What are you thinking?" she asked, covering his hand with hers across the table. For a moment he seemed to struggle for words, unusual for a man whose corporate presentations were legendary for their eloquence. "I'm thinking about Vegas," he said finally, "about how different my life would be if I hadn't followed you onto that balcony. Probably less complicated," Sabine teased gently. "No shuttling between continents, no dance recitals to attend, no wife stealing the covers. And infinitely less meaningful," Rhys countered, his tone serious despite his smile. "Before you, Sabine, I was building an empire for a woman who wasn't alive to see it. I was accumulating wealth without purpose, achievement without joy." The raw honesty in his voice touched something deep in Sabine's chest. "And now? Now I understand what my mother meant when she said true wealth can't be counted or stored," he replied. "It can only be experienced in moments like this, sitting across from someone who knows all your flaws and loves you anyway." Back at the penthouse, their lovemaking held a bittersweet intensity, passionate yet tender, each touch infused with the awareness of their impending separation. Afterward, as Sabine lay with her head on Rhys's chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heart, she allowed herself to acknowledge what she had been avoiding for weeks. "Tomorrow is our 6-month anniversary," she said quietly. "From Vegas." Rhys's hand, which had been stroking her hair, paused briefly before resuming its gentle motion. "I know. We never talked about what happens next," Sabine continued, her voice steady despite the sudden flutter of her pulse. "Our agreement was for 6 months, and then we would decide whether to make it permanent or part as friends," Rhys finished, his voice carefully neutral. "I remember." Sabine propped herself up on one elbow to look into his face, needing to see his expression. "Do you want to talk about it now?" Something flickered in Rhys's eyes, vulnerability perhaps, or uncertainty. "I thought, with the tour starting tomorrow, maybe it wasn't the right time to make major decisions." The hesitation in his voice sent a chill through Sabine. Had she misread everything? After all they had been through, was he still uncertain about their future? "I see," she said, working to keep her voice even. "So you'd prefer to—" "What?" "Extend the trial period?" Rhys sat up, the sheet pooling around his waist as he ran a hand through his hair in a gesture she recognized as discomfort. "That's not what I meant. I just thought, with your career taking such an important turn, you might want to focus on the tour without the pressure of being married?" Sabine finished, a knot forming in her throat. "Of feeling obligated to me," Reese corrected gently. "Sabine, I want you to have everything you've ever dreamed of. The starring role, the world tour, the recognition your talent deserves. I never want to be the reason you compromise your art." Understanding dawned slowly. He wasn't expressing doubt. He was trying, in his awkward, protective way, to give her an out if she wanted it. "Reese Thor," Sabine said, a smile curving her lips despite the tears that threatened. "Are you trying to set me free for my own good?" A flush crept up his neck. "I'm trying to make sure you know that whatever you choose, I support you, whether that's as your husband or whatever role you want me to play in your life." The selflessness of it, his willingness to put her dreams above his own happiness, made Sabine's heart swell with a love so profound it was almost painful. "You ridiculous man," she whispered, cupping his face in her hands. "Haven't you figured it out yet? You're not separate from my dreams. You're part of them." Reese's eyes searched hers, hope warring with lingering doubt. "The tour is an incredible opportunity that I can seize precisely because I have you supporting me," Sabine interrupted. "Do you think I could take these risks, fly across the world, push my boundaries, if I didn't have the certainty of you to come home to? You'd be magnificent with or without me," Reese insisted, though his arms tightened around her waist, betraying his need for her. "Maybe," Sabine conceded, "but I'd rather be magnificent with you." She kissed him softly. A promise. In the gentle press of her lips. "Our 6 months are up, Reese Thor, and I choose to stay. Not because of a studio or security or any of the practical reasons we told ourselves in Vegas. I choose to stay because I love you. Because what began as an impulsive decision has grown into the most real thing I've ever known. Relief and joy." Transformed Reese's expression, years seeming to fall away as he gathered her closer. "I've been carrying this around for weeks," he confessed, reaching into the nightstand drawer to withdraw a small velvet box, waiting for the right moment, afraid of pressuring you. Inside lay a ring unlike any Sabine had seen, a central diamond, surrounded by smaller stones, set in a pattern that echoed the movement of a dancer in mid-leap. "It's not to replace your wedding band," Reese explained quickly. "It's a recommitment, a symbol that what started by accident in Vegas is something I now choose with my whole heart, for as long as you'll have me." Tears spilled down Sabine's cheeks as she extended her hand, allowing him to slide the ring alongside the simple band she had never removed. "Forever," she whispered. "That's how long I'll have you." Morning came too quickly, the first rays of dawn finding them still awake, wrapped in each other's arms, reluctant to surrender to the reality of her departure. Sabine's flight to Paris was scheduled for noon, the Ballet Nouveau company departing for London the following day to begin their international tour. At the airport, their goodbye was poignant but not desperate, a parting tempered by the certainty of reunion. Reese kissed her with gentle passion, then rested his forehead against hers. "Dance like the goddess you are," he murmured. "I'll be in the audience in London, cheering louder than anyone." Sabine smiled through her tears, clutching the lapel of his coat as if to imprint the feel of him on her memory. "I'll save you a bow," she promised. As she moved through security, Sabine touched the rings on her left hand, the simple band from Vegas and the exquisite new ring that Reese had designed himself, physical symbols of a journey that had transformed them both. On the plane, as New York receded beneath her, Sabine reflected on the improbable path that had led her here. From foster child to dancer to billionaire's wife, labels that described the outline of her life but failed to capture its essence. The true journey had been internal, learning to trust, to love, to believe that happiness wasn't a temporary state to be snatched at, but a choice to be made every day. 6 months ago, she had stood at the precipice of a decision, wondering if she dared to leap into the unknown with a stranger who had touched something in her soul. Now, as the plane soared above the clouds, Sabine recognized that the real leap of faith hadn't been saying yes in Vegas. It had been choosing day after day to build something lasting from an impulsive beginning. The world tour awaited, with its challenges and triumphs, its new cities and audiences. Beyond that, a future she couldn't fully imagine. Perhaps children someday, definitely the dance school, certainly a life split between continents. The details were hazy, but the foundation was solid. Whatever came next, she and Reese would face it together. Their accidental marriage transformed into a partnership chosen with clear eyes and full hearts. Sabine closed her eyes, feeling the gentle weight of her rings, and smiled. Some journeys, she had learned, were meant to be shared, and this one, improbable as it had once seemed, was just beginning. Their 6-month anniversary, they returned to Las Vegas, not to end their marriage, but to renew their vows, this time with clear hearts and souls entwined. Under a canopy of stars, Sabine walked toward Reese in a gown that caught the moonlight, her eyes never leaving his. When they exchanged vows, Reese's voice broke with emotion as he promised to cherish her not for a lifetime, but for eternity. The ceremony was intimate, held at sunset in the desert outside the city, with only a handful of witnesses. Sabine's dance instructor, who had believed in her from the beginning, 2 of Reese's most trusted executives, and a surprise guest, Eleanor's sister, Reese's aunt, whom he had reconnected with after years of distance. The woman's eyes, so like Eleanor's, had filled with tears when Reese introduced Sabine as his wife. "She would have loved you," his aunt had whispered, embracing Sabine with fierce affection. "You have her fire." Unlike their first wedding with its Elvis impersonator and neon lights, this ceremony was elegant in its simplicity, a celebration not of impulse, but of chosen love. The officiant, a silver-haired judge who was an old friend of Reese's mentor, spoke of bridges built between different worlds, of partnerships that elevated rather than diminished each person's individual journey. As Sabine and Reese joined hands, the setting sun painted the desert in hues of gold and amber, a canvas worthy of their story's newest chapter. Their original wedding rings were exchanged for new ones, his a platinum band engraved with a pattern that matched her dancer's ring, hers the exquisite creation he had given her the night before she left for the tour. "Sabine," Reese began, his voice steady despite the emotion evident in his eyes. "6 months ago we stood before a stranger and made promises neither of us fully understood. We spoke of love when we barely knew its meaning. Today, I stand before you with open eyes and an open heart, knowing exactly what I'm choosing, a life intertwined with yours, wherever that may lead us. I vow to be your partner in all things, to support your dreams as fiercely as my own, to love you through every triumph and struggle. What began as chance in Vegas has become the most purposeful choice of my life." Tears glistened in Sabine's eyes as she responded, her voice clear in the desert stillness. "Reese, I once told you I didn't need a billionaire husband, that I needed only you. Today, I understand the truth of those words more deeply than ever. I need the man who sees me, who challenges me to be braver than I believe possible, who loves with a generosity that humbles me. I vow to walk beside you as your equal, to nurture the bond we forged through doubt and distance, to choose you, anew each day for all our days. What we found by accident, we now claim by choice, a love worth fighting for, worth sacrificing for, worth building a life around." The judge pronounced them husband and wife, though legally nothing had changed. It was a spiritual renewal, a commitment made with the wisdom that comes from weathering storms together. When Reese kissed his bride as the first stars appeared overhead, it held the sweetness of a promise kept and the passion of a journey still unfolding. The reception was held at the Bellagio, in the same suite where they had spent their first night together half a year earlier. As they moved among their small group of guests, Sabine was struck by how much had changed and how much had remained exactly as it should be. The chemistry that had drawn them together that first night still crackled between them, but it had been deepened by knowledge, by struggle, by the daily choice to build something lasting. "Happy," Rhys murmured in her ear as they swayed together on the balcony, the famous fountains dancing below them in synchronized beauty. "Complete," Sabine corrected, resting her head against his chest where she could feel the steady rhythm of his heart, which is better than happy. After their guests departed, Rhys blindfolded Sabine and led her to a waiting helicopter. "One more surprise," he explained, helping her aboard with careful hands. The flight was brief, the helicopter setting down in what felt like the middle of nowhere. When Rhys removed her blindfold, Sabine gasped at the sight before her. A sleek building rising from the desert like a mirage, its modern lines softened by curves reminiscent of a dancer in motion. "What is this?" she asked, turning to Rhys in wonder. "The Sabine Cove Dance Center," he replied, his expression a mixture of pride and nervousness, as if uncertain of her reaction. "A sister location to the Brooklyn studio, a place where young dancers in Nevada can find the same opportunity you had to escape through art." Sabine walked slowly toward the building, her heart too full for words. The entrance featured a sculpture of a dancer in mid-leap, rendered in gleaming bronze that caught the moonlight. Inside, through the glass walls, she could see state-of-the-art studios, rehearsal spaces, and what looked like dormitory rooms. "It's a residential program," Rhys explained, following her gaze, "for talented kids who need more than just dance. Classes who need a safe place to live and grow. There's a full academic curriculum, healthcare, counseling, everything they might need." "How long have you been planning this?" Sabine asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Since the night you told me about your childhood," Rhys admitted. "About the community center teacher who saw your potential and fought for your scholarships. I wanted to create something that would multiply that kind of opportunity 1,000-fold." Overcome, Sabine fell into his arms, her tears dampening the expensive fabric of his shirt. "You've given me the world," she whispered against his lips. That night in their suite, they rediscovered each other with exquisite tenderness. Sabine's fingers traced the contours of his face, as if memorizing every detail. "I never knew love could feel like this," she confessed, her voice thick with emotion. "Like drowning and breathing at the same time." Rhys pulled her against him, his heartbeat matching hers. "Every success, every dollar, every achievement, they were all empty until you," he said, his hands caressing her skin as if she were made of the finest porcelain. "You've taught me that the greatest wealth is loving, and being loved in return." As dawn broke, they stood on the balcony, wrapped in nothing but sheets and each other's arms, looking out at the city that brought them together. Sabine turned in his embrace, tears glistening in her eyes. "I accidentally married a billionaire," she said, pressing her palm against his chest, feeling his heart race beneath her touch. "But I deliberately fell in love with the man whose soul speaks to mine." Rhys lifted her into his arms, cradling her against his chest as their lips met in a kiss that promised forever. "I will never let you go," he vowed, his voice a caress against her skin. "Not because you're mine to possess, but because we belong to each other, two halves of one heart." As they made love with the rising sun painting their bodies in gold, Sabine knew with absolute certainty that in Rhys's arms she had found something far more precious than any fortune, a passion that burns brighter than 1,000 stars, and a love so profound it transcends time itself, a love that feels like coming home to a place she never knew she was searching for. Their journey had come full circle, back to the city where fate had thrown them together. What had begun in Vegas as an impulsive decision fueled by champagne and chemistry had transformed into a love story neither could have imagined. One built on trust, painstakingly earned, on dreams shared rather than sacrificed, on the daily choice to see each other clearly and love anyway. In the months and years that followed, their lives continued to intertwine in ever more complex and beautiful patterns. The dance center in Nevada flourished, becoming a haven for children with Sabine's talent and determination, but without her luck. Reese divided his time between Thor Industries' growing global empire and supporting Sabine's blossoming career, never missing an opening night, no matter what business crisis might be unfolding. Their homes in New York, Paris, and now Las Vegas became gathering places for artists, entrepreneurs, and dreamers of all kinds, spaces where the boundaries between Reese's world of business and Sabine's world of art dissolved into something richer than either could have created alone. And when, 2 years after their vow renewal, they welcomed twins, a boy with Reese's intense blue eyes and a girl who already moved with Sabine's natural grace, they discovered that the greatest creation of all was the family they had built together, a testament to the truth that sometimes the most beautiful journeys begin with a single impulsive step. What began in Vegas had become the greatest love story of their lives, not because it was perfect or easy, but because it was theirs, chosen anew each morning, cherished through each challenge, celebrated in each triumph. A love that, like the best dances, found its power not in rigid perfection, but in the ability to adapt, to flow, to create beauty from the unexpected. In the end, Sabine reflected as she watched Reese sleeping peacefully beside her on their 10th anniversary. Accidentally marrying a billionaire was the best mistake she had ever made, but deliberately choosing to love the man beneath the wealth, that had been the wisest decision of her life.